Hey, John, thanks for joining us today. As way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Brian. I'm John Silverman. I'm born and raised in New York City, currently living out in the LA area. Um, I've been director of sales at Sky, formerly known as Kenshu, for about a year and a half now, a little more. Um, and I started my sales career in like straight ad sales, advertorial sales, pay for play, as it used to be referred to. And from that, I grew into in a weird way, I peaked too early as a manager of 23 people when I was myself 24, and then humbled myself by working at a place like The Economist for seven months to understand what a real AE role looked like. And then I got into SaaS, and that's kind of where I've laid my hat for the last 6 or 7 years. And I love software as a service, um, whether it's in the ad tech universe or elsewhere. It's something that really gets me going.
Cool. And why sales leadership? What you like about it?
Currently, I'm an individual contributor at Sky. The director might be a misnomer, but I'm a client partner at Sky. I've been a head of sales three different times in my career at startups that have no seed funding to well-established high growth startups. I was actually on a business trip in London for a startup that told me that they didn't get the funding that they had already said that they had, and I was told that I was no longer affordable while I was on the business trip in London.
Nice.
Yeah, so interesting sort of up and down. I have fluidly gone between IC and leadership without much ego around it. I think because of that early role I had, which made it so I was sort of a peer or younger than most of the people that I was managing, and it was a lot of work. One of the questions that you had asked in some of our email correspondence that might be something to talk about is like, what's a misconception about sales that people and I think one of the things that people who get into sales really want is to become a sales leader super quick, and they just don't know what that entails, right?
Yeah.
Half of it is the empathetic. I want to be a leader. I want to motivate. I want to help people through what they're going through. I want to take from, poor performer to great performer or from good to great. That's half of it. The other half is the managing up, the expectations, and the constant need to kind of keep doing new things constantly to find where your rhythm is.
Oh, also, and especially in today in SaaS, the metrics have become a science experiment.
Yeah.
And if you don't either you don't have or can't afford a sales admin or a sales rev ops person, you become that person. Or
Oh yeah.
you torture the reps to enter all the data that's mostly made up and have to report it.
Yeah, I was just watching your video. I'm not sure when you made it, but it just came up on my feed about we just closed our round C and now we need to increase ARR. And you're like, you mean revenue, like what we've been doing the whole time. Yeah, but ACV though. And it's just it really resonated with me because, your point also about increasing quotas from a different video, it all comes together with these expectations with VC money, where you have to have 100% year over year growth and you have to exhibit, this in net new and this in retention. It becomes a bit of a race to the top where the top becomes how much higher can you go? That's the question I ask.
Well, because I work with leaders all the time, and they start going down the acronym path, and I go, "Well, let's stick with revenue
Right.
and new customers, something
Yeah.
we
I
can
mean, it's the lowest
focus
common
on,
denominator.
and everything else, you can get some, hire somebody for 50K to fill in the elements and keep track of it. I'm not against it. It's just like, where does it fit in the priority list?"
Right. Speaking of priorities, you just were talking about like Salesforce admin, sales ops admin. Another one of my favorite SaaS leaders, Scott Leese, very famous for saying that like the number one hire for a new VP of sales has to be a sales admin, sales ops admin. Helps you build everything from ground up, helps you get a clear understanding of what's going in, what's going out, metrics, also not just performance, but also your KPIs in terms of like outgoing calls, outgoing emails, etc. If you don't have that view, to your earlier point, you're basically just drawing things on a piece of paper and hoping for the best.
Well, or you become the sales admin. instead
which
of a
is even
sales.
worse because VPs
Right.
of sales are not good at sales admin.
They're not good at it, and they have the real job.
Correct. Of driving sales.
Right, because at the end of the quarter, you can't say, "Well, look how good the dashboard looks."
That's
No.
beautiful. It's
Yeah,
clean. It shows the blood number right there.
right. You'd rather say like, "Oh, revenue was good. I fell down a little on the metrics."
Right. It's an acceptable sacrifice. But I think a lot of sales leaders in the SaaS world from let me start over. The more desirable sales leaders from the SaaS world these days are data first, which is good and has its obviously obvious drawbacks. One thing I see from that, having been a SaaS leader and then having left that company and been replaced by a data-driven sales leader, is that you have a little bit higher churn on your employees. You have a longer ramp up period to get to your most efficient production numbers in terms of an AE. But what you do have is a great dashboard.
And it becomes you become an accountant instead of a sales leader.
Mm,
And it's real comfortable because the books say it. The
mm.
consultants say it because it keeps them busy.
There's a lot of spinning wheels in terms of non-specific direction based on non-specific numbers
Yeah,
to get to a non-specific goal.
right.
That sounds really good.
And when I talk to salespeople, they just hate it because everything's being counted, but nothing's being accomplished.
Right.
And
That's as a sorry to cut you off, Ben.
but one of them can be faked. One cannot be faked.
That's kind of what I was just going to say. You know, action is very visible. That's why salespeople are motivated, at least I am, by accomplishing things, by getting, you know, the feeling you have when that email comes across of like, we're ready to move forward. You get the goosebumps. You have an action point, which is to build the contract. If you haven't already, push it through the legal. That is accomplishing things. And then obviously when you secure the client, helping them to achieve their goals,
Yeah.
that's something that you can really take to heart as an accomplishment for sure.
And are you comfortable being an individual contributor? Do you like it? Is that where your passion is, or is it only on the path to becoming a leader?
It's a very interesting question. And I think my answer is the least ideal for most people because, like I said, I've been rather fluid throughout my career. So I'm very happy and comfortable in my role at the moment. When I say comfortable, I mean it feels comfortable. I'm always chasing the quota and making sure I have a huge pipeline, et cetera, for whoever's listening. Um, uh, but what I mean to say is that my prior role, I was the head of sales for a global company with 30 direct reports across 4 or 5 different continents. Now I have no direct reports, and my territory is the West Coast, and it feels good, is what I mean to say. So I'm not missing that, yearning for that. However, what I've learned, even in this individual contributor role, having dealt and closed some of my largest deals, if not the largest I've ever closed, um, it has taught me a lot of things that will be helpful to be a leader again.
Yeah.
And I know that I have the foundation on the empathy side, on the growing side, the mentorship side, and the accountability side to already handle that. So being able to really see through the biggest enterprise deals I've ever seen before, managing 16 different teams helping out. It's taking villages to do this. Will form me to be a great leader if and when I choose to become one again. It's not as if people haven't asked. I just I'm pretty happy.
And I've also noticed, like, because I went up and down from leader to rep. When you go back to being a rep, you're so much better of a rep.
Exactly. Yeah,
You've seen
because you
more
saw a lot.
deals.
Yes,
Yeah.
you also have this worldview of like not just the tunnel vision of me closing the deal and linearly doing the ABCD things necessary, but a bigger perspective around these deal terms are going to do what for legal or finance. Do I need to get approvals? Do I not? Can I get this through in this way? Can I formulate the deal in such a fashion that it'll get approved? So and also asking for help, being able to ask internal people for help in such a way that they always want to is a really, really good skill I learned as a leader.
Yeah, because you have to develop that internal
The internal
advocate.
rapport is almost as important as the client rapport, because if the client says yes, you then need to leverage your internal rapport to get it
Get it
done,
booked.
especially if it's custom. Especially if it's custom.
Yeah. Anything out of the normal.
Yeah.
And what have you learned along the road as far as a sales rep? Because now you've seen other reps, not just worked with them, you've managed them. Have you come up
Um,
with a formula or a
I think that if
checklist?
somebody did come up with a formula, they'd be the Google of finding salespeople. That's the beauty of sales. There is no archetype. There are archetypes, but there is no single. I love some of your polling about, how many A players there are. What does it take to be an A player? Are you an A player, etc. Um, I think there's two different types of potential A players. There's the A player that is an A player out of absolute drive, dedication,
Yeah.
effort, and will. That's the hard worker. There also is the A player that is the ability to do things easily, doesn't necessarily need to apply themselves 100% because they are able to get things done according to the comp plan, to the quota, to this, to that, but also a wizard at relationships, right? That's the key point. There's the hard work, and then there's the key, a relationship holder. I find myself a little bit more on the latter as opposed to the former. But there's no escaping the fact that you need to be a really hard worker to be a good salesperson. And one of your other questions that you had asked that was a thought starter for me is like, what do people not get about your job? Forget it. Like my friends, forget it. Like these videos that I see on the internet of this was a real cold call, the anger, the defensiveness, how could you call me? Well, because you're the head of marketing for a major brand and you spend tons of advertising dollars and we help out with that. Is it really that much of a shock? So I mean, like what I mean to say is that people don't get just the difficulty of breaking into a company, much less convincing them to spend tens of hundreds of thousands of millions of dollars.
Yeah. And are you feeling over your career that people are less and less likely to engage with a salesperson? 'Cause
I
I
think
think, certainly the cold call with the cold pitch, you know
I think the days of like picking up the phone and dialing for dollars are probably nearing its end for most industries. There are
Yeah.
certainly industries where you can pick up the phone, dial it up, and hit 100 people a day and find 10 people interested. Certainly, but in enterprise SaaS, I'm not sure that that's really the method anymore. Like first couple months of the pandemic, I would send out emails and I would send out LinkedIn notifications, and I got like multiple things back that were like, "This is tasteless. How uncouth of you! How dare you! People are losing their jobs rapidly." And I actually put a post out on LinkedIn that it was like, I think the dynamics changed here a little bit. Like everybody was losing their job at the time, not just salespeople, not just marketers, not just service workers. Everybody was losing their jobs. So there has to be some element of baseline humanity where we all understand that if we have conversations with each other, there's a higher likelihood that we're both going to have a job when all this is over. It was kind of like a fight or
Yeah.
flight moment. Some people reacted very poorly to that. Other people engaged and we formed partnerships because of it. So I think it really depends on personality. But to your point, like the way you engage with people is a 17-step cadence or flow where they will respond maybe by the eighth and a half touch. And then maybe you get them with some great content in one of those emails, hopefully. Make it personal.
Yeah. Well, because that's kind of the number one thing I hear from reps is that, cold outreach is just ground to a halt.
It's
And
hard to there's no desk phones really for the 100% remote workers anymore. People don't put their cell phones out there. It is
yeah,
hard. It is hard. Absolutely.
right. And, if they happen to pick up the phone, they didn't do it to talk to a salesperson.
They certainly didn't. And that's where I love most salespeople's traps saying, like, they get surprised when they get a pickup, and the first thing they say is, "How are you?" That's going to open up a Pandora's box that you don't really want to know about. And as a matter of fact, you don't really care. You don't. You
Yeah,
just want to talk a little bit about what you do to see if it's a fit for the other person.
yeah,
And I think a little bit of that, I tend to speak to my prospects very much how I speak to my friends, meaning
You
I
don't have a
don't
sales
have a
voice?
professional voice. No,
I
beat me to it.
well, I did a video on sales voices, and it's like
Oh
nothing
yeah,
kills it because it's like, it's like going up to somebody in a bar and asking what sign they are. Or
it's a tired, very obvious tactic.
it's screaming, "I'm a salesperson and I'm here to take something from you."
Right. As opposed to, the first job that I had in sales was when I lived in Europe, and it was for a steel brokerage company based in LA. Weirdly, they had me open up a Central European office, and my job was to go and secure steel production in Central Europe. It was an amazing job. But my first media sales role um, was one where cold calling was the only way that we got in touch with people. And this was in 2009. And I think that maybe when Outreach and SalesLoft and these types of sales enablement tools started coming to preeminence is when cold calling started to have a diminishing effect. Otherwise, why did these companies come to unicorn status? Right? I think there's a cause and effect there.
Well, and management still thinks it is effective because it worked for them in the 90s.
Right? Just pick up the phone. Just pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Like, why haven't you called them? And the amount of sales managers that have said to me that everything can be totally taken care of with a phone call, like, yes, obviously. Sometimes, well, not obviously, sometimes it could get even worse. What I mean to say is that I had a cold call once where it started out really, really well in terms of we were talking about the industry. And that's what my first sales job tried. This was what I was trying to say. My first sales job, my first media sales job. The point was we were positioning ourselves as industry experts. So for example, I would be doing a project about, type 2 diabetes pandemic in the USA, 24 years old, graduated college with a political science degree less than 2 years earlier, but I'm an industry expert in diabetes and I want to talk to Johnson & Johnson about it. And that at least got me into the PR and the comms teams, which then almost certainly got me a conversation with marketing. So anyway, I did have sales personas at some point, but I found that being a genuine person in enterprise SaaS sales is a way better option.
Right. Because I mean, how many times during the day are you lonely? That talking to somebody about you, not them, right? People
Yeah,
still pay. You know what? One of the biggest
that's a great
businesses
point.
is online therapy.
Oh yeah,
And,
Talkspace and some of the others, Betterment. Yeah.
right. And you know what the therapist is doing on the other end. They got their little list of questions. Well, how's that make you feel?
Hmm. Talk therapy. A lot of people do it, and I think it's very valuable. But to your point earlier about sales, like there's action, and then there's talking about action.
Yeah.
So take it for what it's worth, I suppose.
And what drives you? What excites you? What keeps you going?
Um, this is like the age old question. And I think this is another misconception about how the external perceives salespeople. Everyone thinks that we're just like money hungry, and when we win, it's because we've taken the client for something more than they thought they were, and that's a terrible misconception. And I blame Alec Baldwin quite a bit from Glengarry Glen Ross. Um, but the real motivation for me is helping people, and a byproduct of helping people is making a lot of money, being successful in sales. Because in order to help them, I have to sell them something, and then that product will help them. So I try to make the umbrella motivator helping people.
Yeah.
And so when I hear from somebody 6 months down the road after the contract was signed, like, we're seeing incredible results. We're going to add another channel to you. We're going to do this. We're going to increase. It's what I set out to do. And of course, the byproduct is even more money for the upsell.
Yeah. And what keeps you motivated?
Um, I think now, as an IC in enterprise sales, it's the bigger behemoth, the
The
massive
challenge. Yeah.
global brands that normally for everyone else, including me, potentially takes 9 months to a year to close. Finding a way to get those done, finding a way to get them done quicker, finding a way to, I don't know, I take a lot of pride in being able to like bypass certain things in the procurement process, whether it's because I have a great relationship or whether it's because we've shown prowess in our product. Um, you know, last year during the pandemic, we were cutting we the collective, myself, the client, everyone, we're cutting corners because no one was in the office, and we really just had to kind of make do with what we had. Things still took a heck of a long time, but being able to get on the phone with like the general counsel of a Fortune 500 company, explaining what we do, having them nod their head along, asking intriguing questions, that's a cool thing for me. That keeps me
Yeah.
motivated.
How about as far as like the building of resilience, especially in the early part of your career when it was like ad sales, where it was kind of a grind, tons
I
of
mean, the
rejection.
leathery skin just got leatherier and leatherier. I mean,
Uh,
it was battered by the time I left traditional print sales. Oof. Um, I think the resilience has changed from I've been said no by the gatekeeper or junior person so many times, and I need to be resilient in going back to them. That's changed to I need to be resilient in my patience, in understanding that big decisions take big amounts of time. So if I'm working a few major big deals, I need to make sure that I have a few minor to mid-sized deals so that I'm keeping busy, keeping motivated,
yeah.
helping other people in the meantime, and keeping my eye on the longer game prize. So resilience as I've grown older in my career has turned into being a proponent and an adherent more to the long game.
Yeah. And we talked about gaming before we started this. Do you look at sales like a game?
Uh, I tend, I think this is a personal thing. Everyone has the personal thing, but I tend to gamify most everything because
Yeah.
I live my life on a goal reward type basis. That's the result of having a pretty strict single mother as a parent. Um, but I orient myself in a goal reward sentiment, meaning very simply, even on a day to day basis, I'm going to get these 3 emails out. They're going to be amazing, and then I'm going to take 10 minutes to have a snack.
Yeah.
I run my life like that. So I think that gamifying your job is a way to keep it interesting and a way to keep it motivating and fun.
Well, it builds that habit. So you don't have to consciously think about it. It's 3 emails break. And
15 minutes in Salesforce without wanting to jump out the window. Yes.
right.
Yeah.
Instead of the high calorie, what do I do now? What should I
That was
do?
more of a in office when other people are watching you.
Yeah.
Salespeople aren't supposed to be in the office anyway. So whenever they are, unless you're an inside sales team, no doubt about that. But as a sort of enterprise outside salesperson, it's when you're in the office, the eyes are on you because what are you doing here? Unless you're like moving deals forward or doing this or that, like get out. But ever since, I mean, I haven't been in an office since March of last year. Ever since then, the shift has been to let's talk about your clarity call. Let's make sure your notes are up to date. Let's make sure your outreach, not in a micromanaging way, but like for the first time, my manager talked to us about outbound emails for the first time in a long time, not in a
Yeah.
negative way, really at all, but just as a means of saying, like, I'm a new VP who's never actually met any of you in person. She's been there for almost a year now. She's fantastic. I really enjoy working with her. Um, but I've never met any of you. We've never had the chance to be in the office together. How can we talk about something that makes sense to all of us so that we can have some sense of how we're doing?
Yeah.
Because we do need to, in fact, move things forward. Sky acquired a company at the end of last year. We rebranded earlier in the month or late last month. We're clearly making moves. So the importance of maintaining that steady pipeline by whatever means necessary is really important.
Yeah, because I think if managers did more of that, kind of engaged reps in judgment skills, you know, what's working for you,
Yeah,
what's your system, like you have gamified your day to keep the activity consistent, get stuff
absolutely,
done.
absolutely. Where am I on the leaderboard?
Yeah.
There's an element of competitiveness to that as well. When I was head of sales at my last company, there was, to your point earlier, like there was no dashboards, but we did have a good Salesforce admin, and we whipped them up lickety split. One of my first things was we had a New York office, LA office, Paris, London, Sydney, or sorry, Melbourne. I wanted screens in every office showing like revenue, opportunities created, number of emails sent, number of meetings held for everyone in the company on every screen, just so that there's some element of like, ooh, even at the most basic level for a non-sales or marketing employee, ooh, that's a colorful screen up there. What's that? And then I, in front of 8 of my reps in New York, would have been able to say, well, thank you for asking. That's where we're all at in terms of, and oh my God, look at you, Brian. What happened between last week and this week? And all of a sudden you have a conversation that's a little bit more lighthearted because it's in front of a group and it's not necessarily a serious, performance driven conversation where they get come away from that conversation feeling, all right, I got to work to get my numbers up. That's kind of the effect there.
Well, that's also kind of an innate motivator, social status, competitiveness.
Yeah.
And that certainly drives me because
Mhm.
I know that if I look at one of my competitors, it's going to get me like a cup of coffee. All of a
Mm.
sudden now I got a good 45 minutes of, energy and spite that I
Yep.
have to
And
execute.
you take that spite, turn it into the energy to
Yeah,
get things done.
right. And I know that about me. And, I'll leave the window up. So the next time I open up the browser, it's my competitor. It means I got to work more.
Oh, you got jolted again.
Yeah.
That's great.
And
No, that's great.
I think that is one of those elements about the A player. When I hear somebody not being competitive and not really caring where they stand.
Yeah. The
eh,
academic salesperson who comes in and says, I don't really mind about where I am. I just really want to get things done and I want to, work with big brands and stuff like that. Like if that's true, then, a little bit of a red flag for me. But some of those people will say that and then turn out to be some of the most competitive people I've ever met, actually.
Well, like I did this poll about, what motivates you more, the victory of winning or the agony of defeat, avoiding the agony of defeat. And I don't care about the answer. What I look for is the emotional attachment to one or the other.
Yeah.
The people who are kind of like even keeled and that's fine. They probably enjoy life more than I do, but they're not going to stretch.
Right.
They're not going to be working at midnight trying to figure out how to win this deal back or how to keep their competition out. It's that emotional
Yeah.
connection to the outcome, whether it's avoiding losing or gaining win, doesn't matter. It's
Doesn't
that
matter.
emotional.
I really track with that. What like me and my VP were up on June 30th. It was Wednesday. It was like 11:40 Eastern. Um, and we were working to close a deal that was a competitive steal. And the CEO was up. I mean, it was only 8:30 Pacific, so we were still sort of up, and we got it done. And we have talked about it's not a big deal, but we have talked about that a couple of different times now because of the way it made us feel and the
Yeah.
emotions that we had in getting it done before the deadline and taking it away because of the deal terms we made, etc. So I think a great example of what you just said, the fear of avoiding the fear of losing, the thrill of winning. Do salespeople care tremendously when a brand that they haven't yet reached out to gets snagged by a competitor? Not really, because you haven't reached out yet.
So,
But if you've reached out or if you've had contact or if you've done a demo or whatever, and then they go, that is the worst possible feeling that you can have. So I think the emotional tie-in to what you were saying, I think the fear of losing is most applicable when you have had a relationship with a
right.
prospect.
And you also have to be cognizant that early in the sales process, you can't be that emotionally attached to it.
The first no I ever got, like two days after I got my computer at my first media sales job, was from a media buyer in San Francisco who obviously had decades of experience, and here I am, like fresh, green as can be. And I was, they were like, yes, 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 it's going to happen. And then it was like last minute budget changes, which I didn't yet know was like the be all end all answer for just no. And I started an email. Thank God my colleague caught me. I started an email that had like 6 question marks after the first sentence. And she was like, whoa, 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 whoa. This is your first no here ever. Let's have a beer. Let's
Yeah.
talk about this. Do not send that. And so you're right. I struggled early in my career, and I sometimes still struggle every once in a while with getting emotionally attached, especially to these big enterprise deals that you've spent 9 months talking to somebody with. At some point, you start to build this false confidence, like we've spent too much time on this for it to not happen. There's too many people involved for this to not happen, right? And I've learned really hard lessons over the past few years to never feel like that.
Right, because and that's kind of as a leader, you can kind of say, what would a manager tell me to do right now? It's like,
Exactly.
yeah, you've been like that one person say, oh, it's going to happen, but he's not introducing you to other people. He's not asking for an updated proposal. He's not
Right.
asking about new releases. There's
There's
no,
buying signals, but are there buying habits? Like
uh,
if you're only talking with one person, red flag. If you're not getting introduced to other decision makers, red flag. But I think the nature of enterprise sales is I like the old Reagan adage of trust but verify. Trust what your client says, but verify it. There are a lot of people out there who will say never trust what your client says, believe no words that they say. And that's a bit of a pessimistic view. Most people, I believe, are inherently good. It's just that they're put in some awkward positions. So if somebody says something to you that's promising, trust it, but verify it. And if that means verifying it by talking to other people at the org or sending a confirmation email or setting another call, whatever it is, just take the time to do that.
yeah, cool. Hey, John, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
I'm available on LinkedIn, John Eric Silverman, Jon, and you can find me. You can find me there.